All right, we are live. Special edition of the Old Man of the Three with JJ Redick and Tommy Alter. Post Game 7 of Bucks Celtics. Enjoying a delicious bowl of cookies and mint ice cream from Oddfellows here in Brooklyn.
Looks fantastic.
Phenomenal. I would have jumped on this live straight away, but my kids really wanted ice cream after the game, so we had to go wait in line. So I apologize for the delay. Tommy, let's see how good your memory is here. At the beginning of this series, who did I say was going to be the X factor in this series?
I've already given you credit for this, but I will let you brag about it again. Mr. Williams, you said was going to be the X factor, and it was a little shaky there for a little bit, but when it mattered, he was.
Couple thoughts. So first of all, I thought it was a bold strategy by the Bucks for giving a guy who shot well over 40% during the regular season wide open threes.
Corner threes, too.
Wide open, set, just feet set, line you up threes. He shot 50% in the first round. I know he had struggled in a couple recent games, but he was still shooting 37% from the series going into Game 7. And the guy got up 18 jacks. Literally the strategy was, we're just going to help off of him and let him shoot.
Why do you think this is the strategy? I don't really understand.
Well, look, the Bucks give up a ton of threes. They've done that all season. They've done that for years. This has been their defensive strategy. We're going to pack the paint. It's why after Game 1, I talked a lot about how the Celtics really struggled from two. Giannis and Lopez as the primary defenders in Game 1. The Celtics were 3 for 20 against them. They were 2 for 15 on twos against those two guys. So I think they eventually made that adjustment. Pritchard had some moments, obviously, tonight as well. He had a good game. But you're just not going to win in the NBA. You're just not going to win many games if one team makes 22 threes and you make 4 out of 33.
I was going to ask you, do you think, so the Bucks were 4 for 33 from 3. Do you think there's anything the Celtics did defensively? I know they've been great all year that led to that, or this was just them, being cold?
I thought their shot quality was really high. Grayson had some looks. Lopez had some looks. Jrue had some looks. Overall, I felt the shot quality was high. And again, I think one of the risks here, if you're the Bucks, without Middleton, is you need Giannis to be otherworldly every night against a team like the Celtics to have a chance. And look, he had a decent line, 25, 20 rebounds, 9 assists, not incredibly efficient from the field. I thought he missed some bunnies, especially in that second half. He missed 2 or 3 right at the rim. But even if those go in, there's just no one else that's giving you high-level scoring efficiency on that team. And Jrue obviously struggled a bunch from the field. He was 0 for 6 on threes today. So it just the margin for error with no Middleton was so high. And to me, the fact that this series went 7 was such a testament to Giannis's greatness. And we talked about him recently. I made that mistake. He is the best player in the world right now. His impact on both ends of the floor, it's as good as anyone. It's better than anyone.
So we haven't recorded anything since Game 6 on Friday. Can you talk about Tatum for a bit? I mean, he was great today. He was great today, but Friday he was also otherworldly, and it does feel like he's in the process of taking that jump. We talked about a little bit with him when he came on back in February. Well,
he had a really bad Game 5, and I thought the bounce back to Game 6 was important. Just elite shot making. But even tonight, I thought his shot selection was really good. And we talked with Jayson about this on the pod, and we also talked this a little bit with Kevin Durant when he came on the pod. When you are that size and that skilled, I think sometimes there really is a tendency, and it's not because it's ill-intentioned, but there's a tendency to just want to go into what we call God mode and just take really difficult shots because you are capable of making them. But against great defenses, you have to make that adjustment. I thought, obviously, his shot making was insane in Game 6, but some of his passes tonight were great. I thought he did a great job as a playmaker, had a really efficient night. He's really good. Let's look ahead a little bit. And by the way, again, I just want to apologize to Heat Nation. for changing my pick. I got drunk by James Harden's Game 4. I'm not gonna lie, I got drunk by James Harden's Game 4.
They took that personally.
And I make fun of Stephen A. for being a prisoner of the moment all the time. And in that moment, I was wrong. I was wrong. So I will take that L. I think the big takeaway so far in these first 2 rounds of the playoffs is Jimmy Butler as a superstar. And because he doesn't on a night-to-night basis need to put up insane counting stats, I feel like we collectively in the NBA world, we tend to overlook him a little bit in terms of just how valuable he is once we get to the playoffs. We saw him in 2020 go shot for shot at times with LeBron in the finals. He took that team to the finals. So we are huge Jimmy Butler fans here. I think sometimes we do forget just where he is in the hierarchy of NBA players, and he's elite.
Do you also feel? I was thinking about this earlier. Do you feel like people forget with him just how good a closer he is? And you saw this firsthand with him in Philly. But his numbers in the last 2 minutes of games, really since he became a star back in Chicago, have always been towards the top of the league. And doesn't that feel like what you need, in the playoffs? I mean, I was thinking before the game today, when I was thinking about who's going to win, I thought it was going to be a closer game, obviously. And my concern, that's what Middleton is for Milwaukee.
Yes.
Middleton was the guy in the Brooklyn series last year. That's the guy you give the ball with a minute and a half left and say, go figure it out. And that's Jimmy. Boston has that with Jayson, but that's Jimmy in Miami. He's always been that guy. And so does that, whether his counting stats are there, doesn't that mean sort of more when we're talking about just like an elite level playoff superstar, about having somebody who can take over at the end of the game?
Yeah, I did the game with Mark Jones on Thursday in Dallas, and we were talking the night before just about the importance of being able to score in the mid-range during the playoffs. And Mark used the phrase, the mid-range is where the magic happens in the playoffs. And I think there's really some truth to that. And if you look in the last however long you want to keep going back, you obviously need 3-point shooting. And with the exception really of the Golden State Warriors, who shoot a lot of threes and put so much pressure on you from the 3-point line that it opens up the rim. They actually score a lot of points in the paint and at the rim because they're so good in their movement. They're so good with back cuts, with slips and all that stuff. So with the exception of them, you go down the line and it's like every team has people that operate in the mid-range. Every great team, Jrue Holiday, Giannis, whose mid-range numbers have gone up every year, Middleton, Kawhi in Toronto, D-Book and CP in Phoenix, obviously Kevin, and you just need these guys that can get their shots in the mid-range, and Jimmy's one of those guys. And we also tend to talk about him as a two-way player, but there's a bunch of different advanced metrics for guys, and those generally tend to favor players that rebound the ball a lot. So generally those advanced defensive metrics tend to favor Jokic and Embiid and Giannis because they rebound the ball. I'm not saying Gobert. I'm not saying those guys are not great defensively, but Jimmy sometimes I feel like gets overlooked at how good he is defensively because he's a wing, and those rebound numbers aren't what they are. But when we look at defensive field goal percentage when he's guarding a guy, his deflections, his steals, like he's phenomenal on that end of the ball or that end of the court. We should talk. I mean, 2020, these two teams met in the conference finals, and a lot of the core group is the same on both teams. For me, probably the biggest additions would be PJ Tucker for the Heat, his defense, and then for the Celtics getting Al Horford back, because they didn't have him in 2020. That was with the 76ers. And so I think in this series, because Bam killed the Celtics in 2020. He absolutely eviscerated them.
We talked about it on the show with him.
Yes.
Still sends a note to Tatum every year.
Exactly. But so I think that the two guys that I think that weren't there in 2020 that will have the biggest impact on the series.
I have a question about Miami, which is hard to answer because we don't, we're not talking to him, so we don't have specifics on it right now. But I would argue the other, guy that is an addition who hopefully, if he's healthy, should be able to make an impact is Kyle. And he hasn't been right. He hasn't been right for a lot of the season. And he hasn't been right in these playoffs. But, if he is able to get back, whether it's by game 1 or game 2, whatever it is, and be a semblance of himself, don't you think that's another wrinkle that, could potentially change things in this?
Well, Kyle's not the player that he was in Toronto, which is fine. I still think he can make a big impact on the game. I think more about Kyle and the feistiness and the pettiness and having another version of PJ Tucker out there, having another instigator out there, and then across the court you have Marcus Smart potentially and Kyle matching up, which again just adds an element of drama and intrigue for me when I think about this series. I'd love for Kyle to have some games where he hits 5 or 6 threes, but he hasn't been that for them. He hasn't needed to be that for them.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect that.
Are you surprised at all, both in this series and also really in the Brooklyn series, that how good Boston has been defensively without Robert Williams being healthy?
I'm not surprised. Again, you look at their team and they can still trot out 5 guys that can guard multiple positions that all have size. And we've said this before about Marcus. Marcus may be 6'4" or whatever he's listed at. I think I might be a little bit taller than him, but whatever. He plays big. There's that great clip from the game today when Giannis posts him up and tries to spin baseline and he knocks the ball away out of bounds. Like, he's able to hold his own against bigger players. So really it's just the luxury of their roster. Christian Hoover says Marcus Smart is most underrated player in the league. I would love to have a metric for underrated.
I don't think he's underrated anymore. Not after that.
He's underrated.
He's defensive player of the year. He's not underrated.
The guy won defensive player of the year, and he's like on a massive contract.
Why is Al Horford only good in Boston? Like, I understand in Philly. I understand, and obviously
that's not even true, though. That's not true.
He was great in Atlanta back in the day. And I understand in Philly
he was a bad fit in Philly. He's not only good in Boston. A terrible take, Jayson.
I'm phrasing this question wrong.
Jayson, I want you to have this video. I need this video. Tommy just had a terrible take.
Bad take. But what I will say is that, I guess, so I'm going to rephrase this a little bit. Why the fuck did nobody want Al Horford when it didn't work out in Philly? Because nobody did.
Well, it's because of the contract. And so the only team that was willing to facilitate a deal was Oklahoma City, because Sam is a hoarder of first-round picks. So he was able to absolve the contract and then bottom out. And so, I guess he did bottom out. He traded him for Kemba, which he got a pick back. So it's like just Sam Presti playing chess. It's just Sam Presti playing chess, because I don't think his value. And again, maybe there was an overreaction to his year in Philly and that contract size that teams were unable to see how valuable he was still. And that's a tendency we all have when we get to a certain age and we have a bad year or an off year, and we're on a bad contract. Then, you kind of say, well, the guy's washed. And clearly Al Horford is not washed because he's been phenomenal in these playoffs. Tommy, let's hit real quick tonight's game. Mavs-Suns.
You were there for Game 6. So what's the initial thought?
Initial thought. A lot of talk today. And I watched Countdown, and these guys talked about it. I've seen this on Twitter a lot. This has been a constant take on Twitter over the last 2 days. In a Game 7, I'll take the best player, not the best team. And we just saw in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference, the best team win. And we can all agree, without Middleton, the Celtics were the better team. I really believe that. Giannis, of course, was the best player on the floor pretty much the whole series. So I'm hesitant to sort of agree and co-sign with that sort of thought process about tonight, that because Luka is the best player on the floor, the Mavs are going to win. They've got to fix. The Suns have to figure out a way to get CP going. And if you can't get him going, and I'll go to get a little bit what the Mavs are doing differently from, let's say, the Pelicans. You can't get him going. To me, at times, you've just got to feature Ayton. Ayton has shown that he can be a 20 point per game scorer a night. He was that guy before CP got there, and he's had some big games in the playoffs. And a lot of that, some is pick and rolls, of course, with CP. But he's so good at taking advantage of mismatches on the switch. And that's where a lot of this coverage with Dallas is so different in the first round. So even if Powell's in the game, they are up on all the pick and rolls. So all that snaking and getting back to his right hand and getting to that sweet spot on the right elbow, it's just not there. When Maxi Kleber's in, he's doing a great job of being up. And generally speaking, when he's in, there's a late switch. So CP will sort of manipulate it and try to get it, and there's a late switch with Kleber. Made a couple shots on him during the second half the second quarter of Game 6. But I texted somebody on the Suns this the other day. Somebody there. I was like, hey, late in the quarter, bonus time. Let's get CP on one of the blocks. Let's get him posted up. Get him off a live dribble. Get him to his rip-through game where he can just sort of, do this. He's shown that he can shoot over taller players. I got to tell me your thoughts on this. Like, Reggie Bullock, the Knicks clearly missed the guy this year. He started out really slow with the Mavs, but he's showing just how valuable he is. He's done a phenomenal job on both Book and CP in the series.
Well, it seems like as Reggie goes and Dorian, who we talk about all the time in the show, go, it seems like that's how the Mavs go. In terms of how they're shooting and how they just are, what they're getting from them. I mean, Reggie was 0-5 in Game 5, and that wasn't why they lost. But compare that to him in Game 6. And you could even say, when the Mavs sort of took control of the game in the second quarter was when Reggie was hitting those shots. And so it does. I guess my question for you about defending Luka at this point, and we've talked about this, and this has been talked about in other places, but is there an argument to, rather than he's so good at getting these guys open looks, that rather than basically like trying to not let Luka beat you, basically say, Luka, you can take us for 50, but we don't want these other guys to get hot?
Yeah, and I think they did make that adjustment. And I talked with Monty when we have our time with the coaches. I asked him about that, and he did feel like in Game 3 and 4, their help position was too much focused on Luka. So you talk about like boxes and elbows, right? You're on the block when you're the low man. You're on the elbows when he's got it up top or on the wing, and he wanted the guys to sort of inch back out. My thing, and they didn't do this in Game 6, but my thing is you got to keep size on him. And so, yeah, you can play him that way, but when you have a guy like CP on him, he has just scored every time. And the other thing is Luka's so big. It's like LeBron. If you put a smaller guy on him, he just can see everything. So even though you may be in a help position that's sort of gravitating towards your own man, Luka's on-time, on-target passes are as good as anybody in the NBA. And so I think you got to keep size on him. I think that's the most important thing. And then the other the other thing that they've done for a lot of this series with Book is like they just blitz his pick and rolls. And we saw this the other night. Like the turnovers were the biggest problem for Phoenix. Dallas killed them in threes, but they were so out of sorts offensively. They weren't getting clean looks. They had over I think close to 20 or over 20 turnovers. I know at one point the points off turnovers in the second half was 21-2 in favor of the Mavs. So if you're going to get outshot from 3 and you're going to turn the ball over, you're not winning games. But my hesitancy is I think there's some truth to the fact that the best team I think is going to win or should win, but it's hard to watch the Mavs play right now and be like, yeah, I'm going to pick against Luka. I'm going to pick against Luka.
Do you buy this comp? It's not my comp, but a couple have said this on Twitter that there's some 2007 LeBron vibes with him right now.
Oh, interesting. My argument against that, and maybe this is a point even more in favor of Luka. My argument against that is that the Western Conference is much better. And Phoenix is a much better team than the Eastern Conference was back then. That was pre-Celtics, and obviously the Pistons were still very good. But again, that group had been together not then for like 4 or 5 years, so they were not on their last leg, but they had a lot of mileage on that team. But I like that. That's good. I like that. The other thing we talked about in the broadcast with Mark, and I thought he brought up this interesting point. He talked about the way that Luka plays, it's similar to a James Harden in Houston. Is there like a ceiling on that? And like, how much does that impact winning? And obviously it impacts winning because, the Rockets were 1 game away from beating the Warriors and CP gets hurt. They have a chance the following year in the second round to beat the Warriors again. So I think you can impact winning. To me, it's like, what 2 guys? I think you get enough production from Jalen Brunson night to night that he's not the guy I'm talking about. But what 1 or 2 guys are going to have big nights for the Mavs? Yeah. Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, Spencer Dinwiddie had a great game 6. I talked about Reggie. So what 2 guys are going to step up? And if you don't get that production and the Suns take care of the ball, I think the Suns win. Tommy, I think that's it, man. Yeah. I always enjoy doing these. It's always good to see your face. Is there anything else?
Might get some ice cream now. No, we got some really good eps coming up. We're not going to spoil anything, but
we do. We're really excited about.
Yeah, we'll do a check-in after tonight at some point this week before the next episode. But this was fun.
Yeah, always good. Later.
See you. Later.